My name is Alexandra Peterson, but everyone calls me Alex. I'm 32 years old, with an MBA and extensive experience. I truly believed I was ready for any challenge in the business world. That was until I walked into my father's company board meeting and found my stepbrother, Marcus, occupying my seat. The executives around the table smirked, and Marcus, with a cruel grin, announced, "Oh good, the secretary's here. Get us coffee, will you?" Little did he know I had something far more significant brewing. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for what's rightfully yours. I grew up as the only daughter of Richard Peterson, a brilliant entrepreneur who built Peterson Enterprises from the ground up, transforming it into a Fortune 500 medical technology company. My earliest memories are of sitting on his lap in his home office, playing with prototype models as he explained his inventions in simple terms. My mother passed away when I was 7, so for 5 years it was just Dad and me against the world. He'd take me to the office on weekends, teach me about business, and always told me that someday the company would be mine to lead, everything. Changed when I was 12. Dad met Stephanie Williams at a charity gala. She was beautiful, charming, and initially seemed genuinely interested in me. 6 months later, they were married, and suddenly I had a stepbrother. Marcus was 14 when he joined our family, 2 years my senior. At first, things were amicable between us. We were a bit awkward, but he seemed pleasant enough. "This is your new sister, Marcus," Stephanie had said when she first introduced us at a restaurant. Marcus had studied me for a moment before offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Alex. Your dad talks about you all the time." As time passed, I started noticing how Marcus would observe my interactions with my father. The way Dad would ruffle my hair and ask about my science projects, the way he'd bring me to the office and introduce me to everyone as the future of Peterson Enterprises. I didn't understand then how those words affected Marcus, but I would soon learn. By high school, the tension between us was palpable. Marcus excelled in sports and social situations, while I followed in my father's footsteps with science and mathematics. Dad always made time to attend my science fairs, sometimes missing Marcus's games to do so. Stephanie never failed to highlight this. "Richard, you missed another one of Marcus's championships," she'd say over dinner.
"He scored the winning goal."
Dad would look guilty. "I'm sorry, buddy." Alex's science fair was today, and you know how important her education is. I'd see Marcus's knuckles whiten around his fork. Despite the growing tension at home, I remained focused on my goals. I graduated high school as valedictorian and went on to study business at Harvard, just like my father had. During summers and holidays, I worked in various departments at Peterson Enterprises, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. I started in the mailroom, moved to customer service, then research and development, marketing, and finally finance. Dad insisted that to lead effectively, I needed to understand every position in the company. After earning my MBA, I returned to Peterson Enterprises full-time. Dad created a position for me as Director of Special Projects, allowing me to work across departments and continue learning the business holistically. By this point, Marcus had also joined the company, having earned a business degree from Stanford. Stephanie had convinced Dad to bring him on as Vice President of Sales despite his lack of experience. Over the next 5 years, I worked tirelessly to prove myself, not just as Richard Peterson's daughter, but as a valuable asset to the company. I spearheaded an innovative patient monitoring system that became our best-selling product. I streamlined our research and development process, cutting costs by 20% while increasing output. I built relationships with our employees, our clients, and our partners. All the while, Dad continued to mentor me, preparing me to eventually take over as Chief Operating Officer. "You're ready, Alex," he told me on my 30th birthday. "After the next quarterly meeting, we'll announce your promotion to COO. From there, you'll work alongside me for a few years, and then when I'm ready to retire, you'll take over as CEO." I was ecstatic. All my hard work was paying off. But looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs, the way certain executives stopped including me in emails, the closed-door meetings between Marcus, Stephanie, and some board members. The subtle shift in how some people treated me around the office. Then, 3 months before the planned announcement of my promotion, Dad collapsed during a meeting. The diagnosis was devastating: advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months at most. Our world shattered. I spent every moment I could at his side, balancing hospital visits with keeping the company running smoothly in his absence. During this time, Stephanie was surprisingly attentive. Always at the hospital, always speaking privately with Dad's doctors. I was grateful for her support, too overwhelmed with grief and responsibility to question her sudden devotion. Marcus stepped up too, taking on more responsibilities at the company, which I appreciated as it allowed me to spend more time with Dad. In Dad's final weeks, he made me promise to protect his legacy. "The company is your birthright, Alex," he whispered, his voice weak but his eyes intense. "Don't let anyone take it from you. The board will try to push you around because you're young, because you're a woman. Don't let them. Show them what Petersons are made of." I held his hand and promised. 2 days later, he was gone. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and condolence calls. I was barely functioning, moving through each day on autopilot. Stephanie handled most of the funeral details while I tried to keep the company stable. It wasn't until after the funeral that I realized something was wrong. My keycards suddenly didn't work for the executive floor.
Emails
About important meetings weren't reaching me. When I asked Marcus about it, he brushed it off as IT issues following some security updates. I believed him because I wanted to, because I was too exhausted to consider alternatives. Then came the morning of the critical board meeting, the first since Dad's passing. I arrived early, dressed in my most professional suit, Dad's favorite. Watch on my wrist for courage. But when I tried to enter the executive parking area, my access was denied. I had to park in the general lot and enter through the main lobby, where the receptionist, Barbara, looked at me with pity. "They're all upstairs already, Miss Peterson," she said softly. "Started about 15 minutes ago." My stomach dropped. The meeting wasn't scheduled to begin for another 30 minutes. I thanked her and hurried to the elevator, a sense of dread building with each floor I ascended. When I reached the boardroom, I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and opened the door. What I saw inside would change everything. The Peterson Enterprises boardroom had always been my favorite room in the building. With its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the polished mahogany table that could seat 20, and the wall of framed patents my father had earned throughout his career. This was where decisions that saved lives were made. This was where my father had built his legacy. But as I stood in the doorway, the room felt foreign, hostile. Around the table sat 12 people, the board of directors, my stepmother, Stephanie, and at the head of the table in my father's chair sat Marcus. They all turned to look at me, some with embarrassment, others with cold calculation, and Marcus with unmistakable triumph. "Oh, the secretary's here," Marcus said with a smirk. "We'll need coffee. Black for me, cream and sugar on the side for everyone else." For a moment, I thought it was a tasteless joke. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to correct him, to invite me to take my rightful seat at the table. No one spoke. No one would meet my eyes, except for Stephanie, who regarded me with cool assessment. "What's going on?" I finally managed to ask. "Why did the meeting start early? And why are you sitting there, Marcus?" Marcus leaned back in my father's chair, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of ownership. "Family emergency meeting before the main event. Sorry you weren't informed." His tone made it clear he wasn't sorry at all. Stephanie stood, her black mourning outfit giving her the appearance of an elegant crow. "Alexandra, there have been some changes since your father's passing. Perhaps you should take a seat and we can explain." I remained standing. "Explain what?" "Exactly." Gerald Hoffman, the longest-serving board member and a man I'd known since childhood, cleared his throat. "Alexandra, your father made some changes to his will and to the company leadership structure shortly before his passing. We were just reviewing those changes." "What changes?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Dad and I discussed the succession plan extensively." I was to be named Q, then eventually CEO upon his retirement. Marcus chuckled. Plans change, sis. Dad had second thoughts about entrusting his life's work to someone with so little real-world experience. That's not true, I said firmly. I've worked in every department of this company. I've proven myself repeatedly. Nevertheless, Stephanie interjected smoothly, Richard amended his will 2 weeks before he passed.
He appointed Marcus as CEO.
Effective immediately upon his death. The board has already ratified the appointment. The room spun around me. This couldn't be happening. That's impossible. Dad would never do that without telling me. I was with him every day in the hospital. Not every day, Stephanie countered, and not during his private consultations with his lawyers. I looked around the table, searching for all eyes. Where was Franklin, my father's loyal CFO? Where was Diane from Research and Development, who had always supported me? We've made some staffing changes as well, Marcus said, as if reading my thoughts. Franklin retired yesterday. Diane has decided to pursue other opportunities. We're streamlining operations. I felt sick. They'd systematically removed anyone who would have stood up for me, for my father's true wishes. I don't believe any of this, I said. I want to see the amended will. I want to speak to Dad's attorney. By all means, Stephanie said, sliding a folder across the table. Here's a copy of the relevant sections. As for Thomas, he's no longer with the firm. But their new partner handling our account would be happy to confirm everything. I opened the folder with trembling hands. There it was, in black and white, my father's signature. Notarized and witnessed, appointing Marcus as Chief Executive Officer of Peterson Enterprises. Effective immediately upon his death. The document looked legitimate, but something felt deeply wrong. The father who had held my hand in his final days, who had reminded me that the company was my birthright, would never have done this. This can't be right, I whispered. It's all perfectly legal, Alexandra, said Howard Reynolds. The company's head legal counsel. A new addition, I noted. Someone Marcus had brought in 6 months ago. Now that we've cleared that up, Marcus continued, let's discuss your future. With the company. I know how much Peterson Enterprises means to you, so I'm prepared to offer you a position as my executive assistant. You can learn the ropes of true leadership by observing me. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. Around the table, several board members had the decency to look uncomfortable. Others were clearly in on the coup. I could see it. In their satisfied expressions, the way they deferred to Marcus as if he'd earned his position. That's very generous of you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady despite the rage and hurt churning inside me. But I'll need some time to process all this. If you'll excuse me, of course, Marcus said magnanimously. Take the day to process, but I'll need your answer by tomorrow. We're making a lot of changes around here, and I need to know if you're on board or not. As I turned to leave, I heard whispers, just like her father, too emotional for business. Always thought Richard was making a mistake grooming her like that. Marcus will sell that research division within a month, mark my words. That last comment made me pause at the door. The research division was my father's pride and joy, where our most innovative and life-saving technologies were developed. If Marcus was planning to sell it off, something bigger than my personal betrayal was at stake. I left the boardroom with my head held high, but inside I was shattered. Everything I had worked for, everything my father had built and promised to me, had been stolen in the 2 weeks since his death. I had been systematically excluded, undermined, and now publicly humiliated. But as I rode the elevator down to the lobby, grief and shock began to crystallize into something harder, more focused, something like resolve. They thought they had won. They thought I would crumble. What they didn't know was that Alexandra Peterson was her father's daughter. In more ways than one. And Richard Peterson had never backed down from a fight in his life. I walked out of Peterson Enterprises in a daze, the manila folder with the amended will clutched in my hand. The document felt wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint why. My father's signature looked authentic enough, though perhaps a bit shakier than usual, which could be explained by his illness. Instead of going home, I drove to Riverside Park, my father's favorite place to think. We'd spent countless Sundays here when I was growing up, feeding ducks and discussing everything from quantum physics to the best way to make a peanut butter sandwich. I sat on our usual bench and tried to make sense of what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Alexandra, coffee shop, 20 minutes, come alone, Franklin. Franklin Edwards had been my father's CFO for over 20 years and one of his closest friends. If anyone knew what was really going on, it would be Franklin. I rushed to my car and drove to the small coffee shop 10 blocks from the office. Franklin was already there, seated in a corner booth, his usual immaculate appearance now disheveled. His silver hair was unkempt. When he saw me, relief washed over his tired face. "Thank God you came," he said as I slid into the booth. I wasn't sure if they were monitoring your phone. "What's happening, Franklin?" I asked. "They said you retired." He gave a bitter laugh. "Forced retirement is more accurate. They gave me a choice, take the package or face an audit over some conveniently discovered accounting irregularities." Fabricated irregularities, I guessed. Of course. But they would have been convincing enough to destroy my reputation. "I have grandchildren to think about." He leaned forward. "I'm sorry, Alex. I should have fought harder." "No, I understand. But Franklin, that will dot those changes. My father would never, ever cut me out like that." Franklin glanced around nervously before pulling a small leather planner from his jacket. "Your father suspected something like this might happen." About 3 months before his diagnosis, he noticed Marcus and Stephanie having private meetings with certain board members. He asked me to keep an eye on things. He slid the planner across the table. "This looks like an ordinary day planner, but there's a USB drive hidden in the spine. It contains documentation of some very questionable financial moves Marcus has been orchestrating with Howard Reynolds' help. They've been quietly restructuring debt, moving assets around, and most concerning, devaluing the research division." "Why would they devalue R&D? That's the heart of the company." "To make it easier to sell off," Franklin explained. "I've heard rumors that Marcus has already been in talks with Barrett Pharmaceuticals. They've wanted our patient monitoring technology for years, but your father always refused to sell." Barrett Pharmaceuticals was known for acquiring promising medical technologies, jacking up the prices, and making life-saving devices unaffordable for average patients, everything my father stood against. "There's more," Franklin continued, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Your father gave me this the week before he passed away. He made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to him, or if there were any sudden changes in company leadership." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting. "My dearest Alex, if you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct, and you're facing a fight for what is rightfully yours. I've known for some time that Stephanie and Marcus have been working against us. I've tried to protect you and the company, but my illness has complicated things. Do not trust the will they present to you. I've made arrangements with Isabella Chun at Robinson and Partners. She has the original will and documents that will protect your position. The key is in the bylaws. Section 7, Paragraph 3. Remember what I taught you. In business, as in chess, sometimes you must sacrifice a piece to win the game. I may have appeared to give them what they wanted, but it was only to reveal their true intentions. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and the only person I trust to carry on my legacy. Fight for what's yours. Alex, all my love, Dad." Tears blurred my vision as I read and reread the letter. My father had known. He'd been preparing for this betrayal even as he fought for his life. "Isabella," I said, wiping my eyes. "I don't know her." "New partner at your father's law firm," Franklin explained. He switched to her privately. Didn't tell Stephanie. "She's expecting you." Before I could respond, Franklin handed me a final piece of paper. "This is a copy of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the company bylaws. Your father had me make this amendment 2 years ago. The board approved it without really understanding its significance. The paragraph was dense with legal language, but its meaning was clear. Any change in chief executive leadership required a 75% approval from shareholders. If the proposed leader had less than 5 years of senior management experience within the company, Marcus had only been at Peterson Enterprises for 4 years. The board can't unilaterally approve Marcus as CEO, I realized. It has to go to a shareholder vote, Franklin nodded. And guess who controls 40% of the shares? I do, I whispered. My father had transferred them to me on my 30th birthday. Marcus and Stephanie together only control 30%. The remaining 30% is split among the board members and a few other minor shareholders. You only need to convince a few of them to block the appointment. Hope surged through me for the first time since walking into that boardroom. But that document I saw, the amended will, that's why you need to see Isabella. Your father was very careful about his estate planning. If that will is what I suspect it is, there are serious legal questions about its validity. For the next hour, Franklin and I developed a plan. First, I would meet with Isabella Chun to verify the status of my father's actual will and determine if the amended version was legitimate. Then, we would quietly contact loyal shareholders and board members who weren't at the morning's meeting. Finally, we would call an emergency board meeting where I would present my evidence and challenge Marcus's appointment. You'll need to move quickly, Franklin warned. Marcus isn't wasting any time. He scheduled meetings with Barrett Pharmaceuticals for next week. As we were about to leave, Franklin grabbed my arm. Alex, be careful. They've already shown they're willing to go to extreme lengths to take control. Protect yourself. I nodded, suddenly aware of the gravity of what I was undertaking. This wasn't just a family squabble or a corporate disagreement. This was a calculated coup with millions of dollars and my father's legacy at stake. One more thing, Franklin said, his expression grave. Howard Reynolds has been compiling a file on you, looking for vulnerabilities, personal information, relationships, anything they could use against you if you fought back. Let them try, I said, my resolve hardening. They think they know me, but they have no idea what I'm capable of. As I drove to meet Isabella Chun, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock and hurt were giving way to focused determination. Marcus and Stephanie had made a critical error. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as just the founder's emotional daughter who could be manipulated and controlled. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Isabella Chun's office was located in a historic building downtown, far from the gleaming skyscraper that housed my father's law firm of record. This discretion, I would soon learn, was deliberate. Isabella herself was not what I expected. In her early 40s, with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, she greeted me with professional warmth. Alexandra, she said, extending her hand. Your father spoke of you often. I'm only sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Her office was minimalist but elegant, with law books lining one wall and abstract art on another. She gestured for me to sit and got straight to business. I've been expecting you, she said. Your father made it clear that Stephanie and Marcus would move quickly after his passing. So, you know about the amended will they're presenting? Isabella's expression hardened. I've heard about it, yes, may I see it? I handed her the folder. She examined the document carefully, her frown deepening with each page. This signature, she said finally. It's consistent with your father's, but there are subtle differences. More importantly, the notary stamp belongs to Howard Reynolds. Brother-in-law, is that legal? It's a conflict of interest at minimum. At worst, if the signature was obtained under duress or is forged, we're looking at criminal fraud. She set the document aside. Fortunately, your father anticipated something like this. 2 months before his hospitalization, he executed a comprehensive will and succession plan with me as the executing attorney. She unlocked a drawer in her desk and pulled out a thick binder. This is the legitimate will and corporate succession plan. In it, your father explicitly names you as his successor at Peterson Enterprises, to assume the role of coup immediately upon his death, with a transition to CEO within 2 years. Relief washed over me. So the will they're using is invalid? Almost certainly, but proving that in court could take months, even years. Corporate control cases are notoriously complex and slow-moving, but she smiled for the first time. Your father built in some safeguards. The bylaw provision regarding shareholder approval is our strongest immediate tool. For the next 3 hours, Isabella and I developed a legal strategy. We prepared documents contesting the validity of the amended will, drafted shareholder communications, and planned for the emergency board meeting I would call. When we finished, I had a leather portfolio filled with legal documents, shareholder proxies, and a detailed script for the confrontation to come. "Remember," Isabella said as I was leaving, "they're expecting you to be emotional, to make this personal. Don't give them that satisfaction. This is business. Approach it with the same rational detachment your father would have." I nodded. But we both knew this was personal. It had to be. This was my father's legacy, my birthright, and my future they were trying to steal. From Isabella's office, I drove to my apartment to prepare. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I needed food, rest, and emotional support. I called the one person I could trust completely, my best friend, Rachel. Rachel arrived 30 minutes later with Thai food, wine, and fierce loyalty. Those backstabbing vultures. She fumed after I explained the situation. I never trusted Stephanie. Too perfect, too polished. And Marcus, he's always looked at you with such resentment. "I need to be clear for tomorrow," I said, picking at my pad thai. "This can't be about family drama. It has to be about what's best for the company." Rachel poured us each a glass of wine. "Honey, it's both. And that's okay, your father built that company for you. Everyone knows it. This isn't just corporate politics. It's your stepmother and stepbrother trying to steal your inheritance." "I know," I admitted. "But Isabella says I need to keep emotion out of it in the meeting." "Sure, but right now with me, you can feel whatever you need to feel." The permission broke something in me. For the first time since my father's death, I truly cried for him, for our lost future together, for the betrayal by people who should have protected his legacy, not pillaged it. Rachel held me through it all, letting me purge the grief and rage that had been building for weeks. When the storm passed, I felt cleansed, focused. I spread the documents from Isabella across my dining table, and Rachel and I reviewed everything again. "You need to look the part tomorrow," Rachel said after we'd finalized the plan. "The power suit, the one your dad gave you for your Harvard graduation." I nodded. The charcoal gray Armani suit was my armor, my connection to my father, and a reminder of what I was fighting for. Morning came too quickly. I woke at 5, showered and dressed with deliberate care. The gray suit, a crisp white blouse, my father's watch, and the simple pearl earrings he'd given me on my 16th birthday. I pulled my hair back into a sleek chignon and applied minimal makeup. The woman in the mirror looked calm, professional, and determined. She looked like a CEO. I arrived at Peterson Enterprises at 7:30, a full hour before the emergency board meeting I had called. Security seemed surprised to see me but didn't stop me. My access card still worked for the main building, just not the executive areas. That would change today. In the lobby, I ran into Janet from accounting, who gave me a sympathetic smile. "Is it true," she asked quietly, "about Marcus taking over?" "Not for long," I assured her. "Watch this space." Her eyes widened, but she nodded approvingly. "Good luck, Alex. Most of us are on your side, you know." That bolstered my confidence as I made my way to the conference room on the 3rd floor, the largest meeting space outside the executive level. Franklin was already there, setting up a projector and organizing documents. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." We worked in efficient silence, arranging materials at each seat, connecting the presentation to the projector, and testing the room's intercom system. By 8:15, everything was in place. The first to arrive were the board members who hadn't been at yesterday's meeting, including Dr. Sarah Thompson from the Medical Advisory Board, and James Wilson, my father's old friend and business partner. Both looked confused but greeted me warmly. "Alex, what's going on?" James asked. "I got back from London last night to find messages about Marcus being appointed CEO. That can't be right." "It's not," I assured him. "That's why we're here." By 8:25, the room was filling up, the loyal board members on one side, Marcus's allies on another, and the uncertain ones in between. Franklin stood by the door, checking names against our list of invitees. At 8:28, Isabella arrived with her assistant, both carrying additional legal documents. At exactly 8:30, the doors opened one final time. Marcus strode in, Stephanie beside him, both looking annoyed and slightly concerned. Howard Reynolds and three other executives I recognized as Marcus's allies followed behind them. "What's the meaning of this, Alexandra?" Stephanie demanded. "Emergency board meetings can only be called by the CEO or a majority of the board." "Actually," I said calmly, "according to Article 4, Section 2 of our corporate bylaws, any shareholder controlling more than 25% of voting shares can call an emergency meeting when there are questions of executive leadership. As I control 40% of the shares, I'm well within my rights." Marcus snorted. "This is a waste of time. The board has already approved my appointment." "That's one of the issues we'll be discussing today," I replied, my voice steady. "There are significant questions about both the validity of that amendment and the legality of the board's approval process." I nodded to Franklin, who distributed folders to everyone present. "In these packets, you'll find several documents that I believe will change your understanding of the current situation." As board members began opening their folders, I continued. "First, I'd like to address the amended will that has been presented as justification for the leadership change. Isabella Chan, my father's attorney, has some important information to share." Isabella stood, her presence commanding immediate respect. "Good morning. I am Isabella Chan, partner at Robinson and Partners and Richard Peterson's personal attorney for the past 18 months. I was responsible for executing Mr. Peterson's final will and testament dated 3 months prior to
his passing."
She held up a document bearing my father's distinctive signature and an official seal. "This is the legitimate will of Richard Peterson, properly witnessed and notarized. In it, Mr. Peterson explicitly names Alexandra Peterson as his successor at Peterson Enterprises to assume the role of coup immediately upon his death, with a transition to CEO within 2 years." Murmurs spread around the table. Howard Reynolds quickly interjected. "We have an amended will executed 2 weeks before Richard's death that supersedes that document." Isabella's smile was razor sharp. "Yes, I've examined that document. There are several concerning elements that call its validity into question. First, the notary who authenticated it is the brother-in-law of Howard Reynolds, creating a clear conflict of interest. Second, the signature shows inconsistencies when compared to Richard's known signature patterns, particularly those from his final weeks." She placed another document on the table. "This is a preliminary report from a forensic handwriting analyst. While not conclusive yet, it raises serious questions about whether that signature was genuine or obtained under duress." Marcus's face had grown increasingly red. "This is absurd. My father told me personally that he wanted me to lead the company." "Which brings us to our second issue," I said, reclaiming control of the meeting. "Even if the amended will were legitimate, which we have strong reason to believe it is not, the board's approval of Marcus Williams as CEO violated our own corporate bylaws." I nodded to Franklin, who advanced the slide presentation to display. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the company bylaws. This provision, approved by this very board 2 years ago, clearly states that any change in chief executive leadership requires a 75% approval from shareholders if the proposed leader has less than 5 years of senior management experience within the company. I looked directly at Marcus. "You've been with Peterson Enterprises for 4 years and 2 months. This appointment should have gone to a shareholder vote, not a simple board approval." Gerald Hoffman, one of the longer-serving board members, adjusted his glasses as he examined the bylaw. "I remember this amendment. Richard was quite insistent about it at the time." "Because he foresaw this exact situation," I said. "My father was always 10 steps ahead." Stephanie stood abruptly. "This is nothing but a desperate attempt to undermine a legitimate transition of power. Alexandra is upset about being passed over and is trying to create corporate chaos out of spite." "This isn't about my feelings," I replied calmly. "This is about the future of Peterson Enterprises and honoring my father's true intentions for the company he built." I advanced to the next slide, which displayed financial projections. Now I'd like to address what Marcus plans to do with the company once he secures control. Franklin. Franklin stood and walked everyone through the financial documentation we had compiled. The secret meetings with Barrett Pharmaceuticals, the systematic devaluation of the research division, the projected sale prices and subsequent staff reductions. Under Marcus's leadership, Peterson Enterprises would be dismantled within a year, Franklin concluded. The research division, which develops life-saving technologies, would be sold to Barrett, who would immediately increase prices by an estimated 300%, making our innovations unaffordable for most patients. Dr. Thompson, our medical director, looked horrified. Is this true, Marcus? You're planning to sell R&D to Barrett? They're notorious for price gouging. Marcus glared at Franklin. These are confidential business strategies that have been illegally obtained. This entire presentation is corporate espionage. Actually, I countered, as a 40% shareholder in this company, I have every right to this information. What I don't have is any obligation to sit quietly while you destroy everything my father built. The room had shifted. I could feel it. Bored. Members who had been firmly in Marcus's camp were now looking uncertain. Those who had been on the fence were leaning toward me. Howard Reynolds attempted damage control. These are preliminary explorations only. No decisions have been made about selling any divisions. I played my final card, then perhaps you can explain this. I nodded to Franklin, who distributed one last document. A draft sales agreement between Peterson Enterprises and Barrett Pharmaceuticals. For the research division, dated for next week, with Marcus's signature already on it. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, demanding explanations. Marcus standing and shouting about confidentiality and strategic vision. Stephanie attempting to regain control of the narrative. I let the chaos swirl for a moment before raising my hand for silence. Surprisingly, the room quieted. I think the situation is now clear, I said. An invalid amendment to my father's will has been used to justify an improper board action to install leadership that intends to dismantle this company against the explicit wishes of its founder. I am hereby formally contesting Marcus Williams's appointment as CEO on both legal and procedural grounds. I looked around the table. As the largest individual shareholder and the rightful heir to leadership of this company, I call for an immediate vote to reinstate the original succession plan as detailed in my father's legitimate will and consistent with company bylaws. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is a hostile takeover. You think you can walk in here after years of hiding behind your father and just take control? You're nothing but his spoiled daughter who never had to earn anything in her life. His outburst created exactly the contrast I needed. While he raged, I remained composed. This isn't a takeover, Marcus. It's a correction. I've earned my place in this company through years of hard work, innovation, and results. My father didn't choose me because I was his daughter. He chose me because I was the best person for the job. Stephanie tried a different approach. Alexandra, dear, you're under tremendous stress right now. Grief can cloud judgment. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until you've had time to process your loss. My judgment is perfectly clear, I replied. And my father taught me that there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. Marcus, now desperate, made his fatal mistake. He stood up, pointed at me, and sneered. Stop this nonsense and get coffee. That's all you're qualified to do around here. The room went still. Even his allies looked uncomfortable at the naked sexism in his statement. I held his gaze steadily as I reached for the intercom button on the conference phone. Security, I said clearly. Please come to conference room 3B. We need to escort some ex-executives from the building. Marcus laughed. You can't be serious. I'm the CEO of this company. Not anymore, said James Wilson, standing. I move that we recognize the legitimate will of Richard Peterson and acknowledge the bylaw violation in yesterday's appointment. I further move that we immediately reinstate the original succession plan, naming Alexandra Peterson as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. I second the motion, said Dr. Thompson. Gerald Hoffman, who had been watching silently, nodded slowly. As the senior board member present, I call for an immediate vote. One by one, the board members voted, those loyal to my father, those who had been deceived by Marcus but now saw the truth, even a few who had actively participated in the coup but now recognized which way the wind was blowing. The final tally: 14 in favor, 6 opposed. I was officially reinstated as the rightful coup of Peterson Enterprises. The doors opened and 2 security officers entered. I had called them earlier as part of my preparation, explaining the situation and providing documentation of my shareholder status. "Miss Peterson," the lead officer asked, "how can we assist you?" "Please escort Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, and Mr. Reynolds from the building. Their access credentials should be immediately revoked." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. This is my company." "No," I said quietly. "It never was." As security approached, Stephanie grabbed her purse with cold dignity. "This isn't over, Alexandra. We'll contest this in court." "You're welcome to try," Isabella said, gathering her documents. "I look forward to deposing everyone involved in the creation of that fraudulent will amendment." Marcus had to be physically guided toward the door, still shouting threats and insults. Howard Reynolds followed silently, his legal mind already calculating the professional damage he had done to himself. As they reached the door, I couldn't resist one final comment. "Oh, and Marcus, I take my coffee black. Just for future reference." The door closed behind them, and for a moment the room was absolutely silent. Then James Wilson started to applaud. Others joined in until the conference room filled with the sound of approval and relief. I had done it. I had reclaimed my father's company. But as the applause washed over me, I knew that the real work was just beginning. The hours following the confrontation passed in a blur of activity. The board meeting continued. Now with me officially recognized as coup, we had immediate issues to address: revoking Marcus's executive orders, canceling the meetings with Barrett Pharmaceuticals, and communicating the leadership change to employees, partners, and shareholders. James Wilson, now acting as interim chairman of the board, stood beside me as we addressed the company via the internal broadcast system. Peterson Enterprises has always been a family company, he told the assembled employees who had gathered in the atrium and those watching from their desks. Today, we reaffirm that tradition by welcoming Alexandra Peterson as our chief operating officer in accordance with Richard's wishes. The confusion of the past few weeks is behind us, and we move forward united in our mission to create medical technologies that save lives. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. My father built this company on 3 principles: innovation, integrity, and compassion. Those principles will continue to guide us. I know there have been rumors and uncertainty, but I want to assure everyone that Peterson Enterprises remains committed to its mission and to each of you who make our work possible. The response was encouraging. Applause, smiles, even a few tears from longtime employees who had known my father well. But I wasn't naive enough to think the transition would be smooth. Marcus had allies throughout the organization, people he had promoted or promised to promote. There would be resistance, resentment, and challenges ahead. I spent that first afternoon in a series of critical meetings. First, with the executive team, half of whom had been appointed by Marcus. I made it clear that I would evaluate each of them based on performance and loyalty to the company's mission, not past alliances. Some looked relieved, others wary. Next came a meeting with our major clients, several of whom had heard rumors about the potential sale to Barrett. I assured them that the research division was not for sale and that all existing contracts would be honored. Most were satisfied, but our largest client, Memorial Hospital Group, remained concerned. "We need stability," said their purchasing director, Jennifer Mills. "These kinds of leadership disputes make us nervous about long-term partnerships." "I understand," I told her, "which is why I'd like to invite you to tour our research facility next week and see our new patient monitoring system in action. We're still the same innovative company you've always trusted." She agreed to the tour, but made no promises beyond that. It was a start, but I knew we had a lot of relationship repair ahead of us. By 7 that evening, I finally made it to my father's office, now officially mine. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before entering. The space was exactly as he had left it, from the collection of antique medical devices on the bookshelves to the family photos on his desk. I walked slowly around the room, touching the leather chair where he'd sat, the books he'd read, the awards he'd won. Franklin found me there, staring out the window at the city lights. "Big day," he said simply. "The first of many," I replied. "What's the damage assessment?" He handed me a tablet with a preliminary report. Marcus had already started implementing changes. He reassigned 15 people from research to sales, cut the development budget for the neural interface project, and had Howard draft termination letters for several department heads loyal to my father. I scrolled through the document, my concerns growing. He did all this in 2 weeks? He was moving fast. The deal with Barrett was further along than we thought. They were planning to announce it at the end of the month. I set the tablet down. "We have a lot of work to do." "Yes," Franklin agreed, "but not all tonight. Go home, Alex. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another battle." He was right. But I still spent another hour in that office, familiarizing myself with the current projects and priorities. When I finally left, the building was quiet, most employees gone for the day. As I walked through the executive floor, now with my access fully restored, I noticed light coming from what had briefly been Marcus's office. Inside, a young woman was removing Marcus's personal items and restoring the space to its previous configuration. She jumped when she saw me. "Miss Peterson, I didn't know you were still here." "Just heading out," I said. "And you are?" "Alicia Wilson. I'm from facilities management. Mr. Franklin asked me to, reset this office." I smiled. "Thank you, Alicia. And please call me Alex." She relaxed slightly. "People are really glad you're back in charge, Alex. Mr. Williams, he changed things so fast. Made everyone nervous." "Change isn't always bad," I said. "But it should be thoughtful, purposeful, not just for the sake of change. That's what my dad always says. He works in R&D. Says your father saved his job twice during downturns because he valued good people over short-term profits." It was exactly the kind of story I needed to hear at the end of such a tumultuous day. A reminder of why the fight had been worth it. The next weeks proved even more challenging than I had anticipated. 3 days after the confrontation, Marcus and Stephanie filed a lawsuit contesting the board's decision. Their legal team, led by Howard Reynolds, claimed that the bylaw regarding shareholder approval had been improperly applied and that the amended will was legitimate. Isabella assured me their case was weak, but the legal battle would be a distraction and a drain on resources. Meanwhile, we discovered that Marcus had made commitments to several partners that we couldn't possibly fulfill, apparently setting me up for early failures. The most serious crisis came when our manufacturing facility in Boston reported quality control issues with our newest heart monitoring device. Marcus had reduced the QC team as a cost-cutting measure, and several potentially defective units had shipped to hospitals. We immediately issued a voluntary recall, but the damage to our reputation was significant. Memorial Hospital Group suspended their order, and our stock dropped 15% in a single day. I worked 18-hour days, flying to Boston to personally oversee the quality review, meeting with affected hospitals to rebuild trust, and implementing new safety protocols that exceeded industry standards. The recall cost us millions, but I refused to compromise on patient safety. Throughout these challenges, I was building my own executive team. Some of Marcus's appointees proved their worth and stayed on. Others were replaced with a combination of company veterans and fresh talent from outside. I reinstated the employees Marcus had sidelined and restored the research and development budget. Slowly, steadily, we regained our footing. The lawsuit dragged on, but our day-to-day operations stabilized. Months after the confrontation, we released an upgraded version of the heart monitor with enhanced safety features and improved functionality. Orders surged, including a renewed contract with Memorial Hospital Group. 6 months in, we won a major legal victory when the judge dismissed several key claims in Marcus and Stephanie's lawsuit. Isabella's meticulous preparation and the mounting evidence of Marcus's mismanagement had turned the tide decisively in our favor. Around this time, I began to make more fundamental changes to the company culture. My father had built a strong organization, but there were areas where we could improve. I implemented a more transparent communication system, created cross-departmental innovation teams, and established an employee development program that identified and nurtured talent at all levels. I also transformed the physical workspace. Moving away from the sterile corporate atmosphere, Marcus had begun to impose and back toward my father's vision of a creative, collaborative environment. The executive floor, once isolated and exclusive, became more accessible. I converted the rarely used executive dining room into a communal innovation space where employees from different departments could meet and share ideas. 9 months after taking control, I faced my biggest decision yet. Our neural interface technology, the project Marcus had tried to defund, had made a breakthrough. We had developed a system that could potentially help paralyzed patients regain some motor function. The technology was promising, but still experimental, and bringing it to market would require a massive investment. The board was divided. Some wanted to license the technology to a larger company with more resources. Others suggested a cautious, limited release to recoup development costs before expanding. A few even revived Marcus's idea of selling the entire division. After considering all perspectives, I made my decision. We would develop the technology ourselves, partnering with 3 research hospitals for clinical trials. It was risky, requiring significant capital investment, but it aligned with our core mission, creating accessible, life-saving medical technologies. Your father would be proud, Franklin told me after I announced the decision. This is exactly the kind of bold move he would have made. It was the highest compliment he could have given me. And yet, I realized something important. I wasn't just following my father's playbook anymore. I was charting my own course, making decisions based on both his values and my own vision for the company's future. That night, sitting in what was now truly my office, I looked at my father's photo on the desk and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before his illness. I was honoring his legacy, not by simply preserving what he had built, but by growing it, improving it, making it sustainable for the future. The company was no longer just my inheritance. It was becoming my own achievement. 1 year after the dramatic boardroom confrontation, Peterson Enterprises held its annual leadership conference. As I stood at the podium looking out at the hundreds of employees gathered in the hotel ballroom, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. A year ago today, I began, Peterson Enterprises stood at a crossroads. We faced challenges that threatened not just our bottom line, but our very identity as a company dedicated to innovation, integrity, and compassion. The audience was silent, remembering the turmoil of those days. Today, I'm proud to announce that we have not merely survived those challenges. We have emerged stronger because of them. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, showing our financial results for the year. Revenue up 17%. Research and development productivity increased by 22%. Employee satisfaction at its highest level in company history. But numbers only tell part of the story, I continued. The true measure of our success lies in the lives we've touched. The next slide showed Emma Thompson, a 16-year-old patient who had been one of the first to benefit from our neural interface technology. The video played, showing Emma, who had been paralyzed in a car accident, moving her hand for the first time in 3 years. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. This is why we do what we do, I said softly. This is why every struggle, every late night, every difficult decision is worth it. After the presentation, during the reception, I found myself surrounded by employees eager to share their perspectives on the company's transformation. Junior researchers excited about the collaborative culture. Veteran engineers appreciative of the renewed focus on innovation over profit. Sales representatives energized by having products they truly believed in. Rachel found me as the crowd thinned, handing me a much-needed glass of champagne. Quite a difference from last year, she observed. Remember how you could barely eat before that board meeting? I laughed. I was terrified, convinced I was going to throw up in front of everyone. You never showed it. You were a force of nature that day. Franklin joined us, looking relaxed in a way I rarely saw him during working hours. The lawsuit is officially over, he announced. Marcus and Stephanie dropped the remaining claims this morning. Their lawyer called Isabella to work out the details. That's wonderful news, I said, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. Any conditions? Just one, Franklin replied. Marcus wants a meeting with you, alone. I hesitated. I hadn't seen or spoken to Marcus since that day in the boardroom when security had escorted him out. Part of me wanted to refuse out of principle, but a larger part was curious. What could he possibly want after all this time? Set it up, I decided, but at a neutral location, not at the office. 2 days later, I sat in a private room at Riverside Cafe, the same coffee shop where Franklin had given me my father's letter a year earlier. When Marcus walked in, I was struck by how different he looked. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a more subdued demeanor. He'd lost weight, and there was a new maturity in his face. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sitting across from me. Franklin said you had something to discuss. Marcus nodded, clearly uncomfortable. I wanted to tell you in person that I'm dropping the lawsuit and moving on. I've accepted a position with a tech startup in Seattle.
Congratulations, I said.
Neutrally, I wish you success there. He studied me for a moment. You don't hate me, do you? Even after everything? I considered the question carefully. Hate requires too much energy. I was angry, yes, hurt, betrayed. But hate? No. You should, he said with a bitter laugh. What I did was unforgivable. Why did you do it? I asked, the question that had haunted me for a year. We were step-siblings. We could have been allies. Marcus was quiet for a long time. I was jealous, he finally admitted. From the first day, it was clear you were the favorite. The heir apparent. My mother always told me that I deserved a share of Richard's success, that he owed it to us. He gave you opportunities most people would dream of, I pointed out. Vice President of Sales at 28, that was incredibly generous. I know that now, Marcus acknowledged, but at the time, all I could see was what I didn't have, what you had. Richard's complete trust, his mentorship, his pride. The honesty surprised me. And Stephanie, where is she now? Switzerland. Living. Off her divorce settlement. We don't speak much anymore. He hesitated. She was the one who pushed hardest for the takeover. She convinced me we were entitled to more. I nodded, remembering Stephanie's cold calculation. And now I'm trying to build something on my own terms. No shortcuts, no manipulations. He met my eyes directly. I owe you an apology, Alex. A big one. What I did to you, what we tried to do to the company, it was wrong. I'm sorry. The apology was unexpected, and I sensed it was genuine. A year ago, I might not have been able to accept it, but the challenges of leading Peterson Enterprises had changed me, given me perspective. Thank you for that, I said. I appreciate your honesty. As our meeting concluded, Marcus asked one final question. Do you think Richard would be proud of how you've run the company? I smiled. I think he'd be pleased, but more importantly, I'm proud of what we've accomplished. The company isn't just his legacy anymore. It's becoming mine too. Walking back to my car afterward, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The conversation with Marcus had helped me realize how far I had come from that horrible day in the boardroom when they had mistaken me for a secretary. Back at the office, I found Franklin waiting in my office with a small package.
This came for you, he said, from Richard's storage unit.
The lawyers found it during the final inventory. Inside the package was a small wooden box with my name engraved on the lid. When I opened it, I found a handwritten note from my father. And his favorite fountain pen, the one he had used to sign his first patent application. The note reads simply, "For the next chapter, write it boldly. Love, Dad." Tears filled my eyes as I held the pen. It was as if he had somehow known exactly what I would need to hear at this moment. In the year since reclaiming my position, I had focused so intently on preserving my father's legacy that I had sometimes lost sight of my own vision. This simple gift reminded me that while honoring the past was important, my true responsibility was to the future. Over the next few months, I began implementing changes that were uniquely my own. We established the Richard Peterson Foundation, dedicated to making medical technology accessible to underserved communities. We launched an incubator program for women entrepreneurs in medical innovation. We reimagined our corporate structure to be more collaborative and less hierarchical. The neural interface technology that had been my first major decision continued to develop promisingly. Emma Thompson, our first patient, had progressed to moving her entire arm and was becoming a powerful advocate for our work, speaking at medical conferences alongside our research team. 18 months after the confrontation, Peterson Enterprises was named one of the most innovative companies in America by Technology Review. The accompanying profile highlighted not just our technological breakthroughs, but our corporate culture and commitment to ethical business practices. The journalist who wrote the piece asked me what I considered my greatest achievement since taking over. My answer surprised her. Creating a company where no one would ever be dismissed as just anything, I told her. Not just a secretary, not just a technician, not just an accountant. Every person at Peterson Enterprises is valued for their contributions, their ideas, and their potential. It was true. The most profound change I had made was to flatten the arbitrary hierarchies that create distance between people and their potential. The executive who had once mistaken me for a secretary now led our diversity and inclusion initiatives, having learned firsthand the cost of underestimating people based on assumptions. As for me, the journey from that humiliating moment in the boardroom to leading a thriving, innovative company had taught me invaluable lessons. That sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage, allowing you to prepare and plan while others grow complacent. That true leadership isn't about titles or corner offices, but about vision, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. That family isn't always defined by blood or marriage, but by shared values and mutual respect. And perhaps most importantly, that our greatest strength often emerges from our moments of greatest vulnerability. On the second anniversary of taking control of Peterson Enterprises, I hosted a company-wide celebration. As I looked out at the faces of employees who had become colleagues, partners, and friends, I felt a deep sense of belonging and purpose. 2 years ago, I told them, someone tried to reduce me to a stereotype, to dismiss my capabilities and my rights with a simple order: get us coffee. It was meant to humiliate me, to put me in my place. I paused, remembering that moment of shock and anger. Instead, it became the catalyst for transformation. Not just for me personally, but for this entire company. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities for growth. The applause was warm and genuine, a reflection of the culture we had built together. Later that evening, as I sat in my office looking at my father's photo, I felt his presence strongly, not as a shadow I was trying to live up to, but as a foundation upon which I was building something new and meaningful. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "And we're just getting started." What moment in your career has taught you the most about standing up for yourself? Have you ever been underestimated and used it to your advantage? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who underestimate you are giving you your greatest opportunity to prove them wrong. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.